master has placed you in a dreadfully precarious position.
Dungeon Master and Dwarven Sword Master, Hobgoblins, Dwarves, Elves, and Halflings are some of the characters and terms used in this very complicated and controversial game.
You're playing the most phenomenal game ever created.
What's up, everyone? It's another week, another Wednesday, another Natural Ones. We're back at it with most of the edits out of the way for White Box, at least the big, horrible ones. I'm able to have time to stream again, which I'm very happy to do. And I think that this week's stream will be very relevant. I'm joined by Critical Dom.
Howdy-ho.
He is writing a book. We've had him on multiple times before, but he's writing a book about the history of D&D. And I think it's a much needed book. And we're going to talk a little bit about the history of D&D, specifically the timeline of how Blackmoor became what it is, into integrating chainmail and into the game that we know and hopefully love, is in regards to the 1974 edition of OD&D, of Dungeons and Dragons. And this is going to probably be somewhat, I guess the word would be, polemical against certain claims of even some D&D royalty like Rob Kuntz and those that sort of rub shoulders with D&D greats like Griffith Morgan from the Secrets of Blackmoor documentary. But the reason to hammer so hard on this and to push on this is I think that, and I think Dom would agree with me on this, I think the history is important. We know where the game came from. We can kind of maybe understand the game a little bit better. And I'm happy to have Dom here. He's been doing way more research than even I have, is in regards to at least history. So I'm glad that he, and you all should thank him for taking some time out of his day to come chat with us about Stupid Elf Game. So thanks for being here, Dom. I appreciate it.
I have to admit, sometimes I do think whether or not it really is just Stupid Elf Game and is actually unimportant. I got to say.
It's true.
But there's a certain quote from a favorite author of mine, Jacques Barzon, that comes to mind. And it's something like Dulcis Discipere in loco parentis. Now, it's a book about education, but what it means is, how sweet it is to lose one mind in place of the parent. And what that seems to mean for me right now is I have a ton of books. I have a ton of sources. I am having to go through them. I'm going through them again. I may be going through them a third time, because each time you go through this stuff, you always find something else. So, for example, you're talking about the excellent Blackmoor documentary. I was just watching it within a few days, and I noticed that when they are doing these combat checks, they're rolling 2d6s. And even though Bob Meyer at the time had taken over the game for Arneson, they're still using some kind of combat system using 2d6s, as they have done since the 1970s.
Yeah, and what game uses 2d6? It's the man-to-man tables in chainmail, so.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking at that right here. Hold on. So we got a fantasy combat table. It's pretty sweet. The fantasy reference table, because you've got to have your special abilities for your halflings, because they are terrorists. Man-to-man melee table. Roll 2 dice. Score equal to or greater than the number shown kills. Ta-da.
Yeah, I don't know where exactly to start within this discussion, because there was people that were making arguments. There was a couple of different people that made arguments against me, and it got a little heated. I've since sort of we've cooled things off with that person, and we're at least seemingly cool again, which is good. I don't want to cause an inflammation of passions in the hobby of people and make things more difficult for people than they really do. I'm really passionate about this, and I think it's really important. But one argument that I saw, not from just this person, but from multiple people, there was one person that was a little more vitriolic about it to me. Mm-hmm. They were like, oh, well, it started as a Bronstein game, you see, and it didn't even start as chainmail, and it's to me weird because a lot of people make this. I saw a bunch of people making that claim, and it's like, when was my? How does that change my argument? Like, how does that change? Because I think the argument needs to be rephrased, and this is all it is to play 0E rules as written. If you want to have all the holes, as many of the holes, you're not going to have all the holes covered, but as many of the holes within those 3 LBBs from 1974 covered, you need to at least reference chainmail for a number of things. Even if you're going to use the D20 alternative combat system for everything, like I do in White Box, I still had to look at chainmail to fill in a lot of gaps because there's just not enough. There's not enough there within 0E, within the 3 LBBs, for you to actually get a full game where you know how to do everything, and especially without anachronistically looking to like Moldvay or later editions and trying to draw from that. So
because your whole thing is as the game was when it came out in 1974.
yes, that's the argument. Like, what? It's 1970. I've said this so many times. Like, it's 1970.
It was in your trailer. I recall watching that.
Yeah. Like, it's 1974. All you have are these books. How are you going to play the game? And I offer one way of interpreting that and doing that. And it just seems to be, I think it's one of those instances, we see it all the time in philosophy, logic, politics, any sort of like contentious debate where people have like presuppositions in their mind, and then even opposing positions are interpreted through that understanding of their presupposition. So they can't even hear what you're saying properly. It seems like.
Yeah, unfortunately, quite often when it comes to dealing with an interlocutor like that, you wind up not actually dealing with them, but rather talking to the audience. And this happens quite a bit if you watch certain old debates where at some point there's very clearly a point where there's not some kind of compromise. You're not really having much of a dialectic, and you're not going to get to that state of aporia like Plato wants to do or Socrates wants to do. So you wind up just playing to the audience, making fun of the other guy, because ridicule is the natural result of that sort of thing, unfortunately.
And I don't want to ridicule people here necessarily, but you know, I do think that for the sake of people, because there's people out there that watch my channel, there's people out there that follow you, they backed your project on Kickstarter for this history book, and so they're interested in their minds are open and they're interested in that sort of thing. So these sort of discussions are for that person that kind of wants to delve a bit deeper, and maybe they disagree with me. I've had people say that as well, like, you know, hey, I disagree with how you interpret some things or how you do some things, but I nevertheless appreciate the fact that you're delving into this stuff and looking at it seriously, because honestly, there's not many other, especially out here in Dungeon Tuber land, there's not many others that are doing that. Daniel from Bandit's Keep, I can think of as one guy who's very prominent, who like I respect a lot, and he seems to be taking this sort of stuff seriously. But there's not much else, and so I think it's important work. And yeah, it's like kind of like stupid elf game, but we love this hobby, as we're really passionate about it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be playing it, and you know, we're kind of fanatical about it. So I think it's important to have to defend certain ideas and to really sort of push back and just not really question the presuppositions and positions of people as they present them, especially when they're trying to, what I feel like, construct a narrative. And maybe we can get into this at some point in the discussion. We've talked about this in DMs, but the motivations of people and what they're trying to do or how they're trying to do it in sort of repainting the history of D&D.
Yeah, we even find chainmail erasure to be something that comes up immediately in A&E, although that's in 1975. So what I've not really seen people making the point of, and I'm actively considering this, is D&D when it came out, we're talking $10. That's about $60 today. Chainmail, once TSR acquired it, was like $5 or so. I know sometimes they'd have a coupon or something like that. So you're talking $15. That's a lot of money for a game. So, you know, even people in the LA area, maybe they didn't exactly have the cash to shell it out. Of course, that's being quite generous, because when you read A&E 1 and 2 or so on, it's also really clear that they didn't give chainmail a chance. And because of that, they're playing without some extra abilities that the fantasy races have. And it's also going to be much more difficult in some cases because you're trying to play this game and you don't have the fantastical combat table. Because it seems to be the case that it doesn't matter if it's today, it doesn't matter if it's 50 years ago. The example of a troll against a party or a single character is what we always refer to. So, for example, if we're talking about a timeline, a while back I posted an interview from Bob Meyer, and in it he talks about how he was probably the first guy to effectively play test the fantasy section of Blackmoor, because that's where the troll under the bridge story came from. And as he tells it in that video, he basically got surprised on the troll, rolled 2d6s, missed, and then he got another chance, 2d6s, missed. Troll sees him at this point, lops his head off, he dies, and he was rather miffed at that and basically swore off Blackmoor until a long time later, because everybody else was wanting to play it more and more, he decided to get back into it. Because at this point, you've got armor class coming in, you've got hit dice coming in. And what I found interesting about the interview is that the hit dice are only D6s anyway. Because, you average hit points of maybe, a 3, and then average damage about the same. It doesn't seem like it's that big of a change at that stage, and yet they really latch onto it, and they really enjoy it. And a big part of that seems to be due to Arneson's capacity as a storyteller, which directly results from his cultivation of sword and sorcery books, especially Conan, right?
Sure.
And all that stuff seems to be happening in or around 1970, going into 1971, because you don't have the fantastical combat table until Chainmail comes out in that year. Now, they seem to wind up adopting this because Dave Wesley, Bronstein fame, says in, I believe it's episode 3 of the Wind Weaver Wizards podcast, that they had fought some trolls, then they're fighting trolls again later, but Arneson had decided that these trolls were better trolls. They were basically stone trolls. And because of that tactic you tried last time to beat them, it didn't work. Wesley calls them out on this. And of course, they have a rules argument because they're war gamers. It's what we do. We argue rules and interpretations, and we love it. But eventually, they come to this conclusion: we're going to adopt the chainmail stuff in order to have consistency when it comes to these things. So you don't feel as if you're being cheated by the DM the entire time. Because if, it's a troll, I whack it with, say, like an 8, come back later, oh, you need like a 10. This is a super troll. But it looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
Come on. So that's sort of what is going on at that stage. And, Arneson himself says that Blackmoor and fantasy role-playing began in 1971. And he's got the court documents to prove it, again, for the Blackmoor documentary at the very beginning of it. Well, that would seem legally conclusive as for a time when he at least considered Blackmoor to start. And then because they're using the fantasy combat stuff, even with modifications, it's still part of how that game came about. Because eventually what we get is November of 1972, the Blackmoor crew effectively drives like 5 hours to go over to Gygax's house, and then Arneson runs Blackmoor. And when he does so, you've got Gary, I think some of his kids are there. Of course, Rob Kuntz is there. And it sets their imaginations on fire. And because of that, the following month, Gygax sends a letter to Arneson saying, hey, okay, I need these rules because this is amazing. We have to also keep in mind that at this time, Gygax, having lost his insurance job, is cobbling shoes and then also designing rules and producing some stuff for Guidon Games. And although Lowry eventually goes, under the water, he is still known as a guy who prints and gets stuff done. That's why eventually Dungeon also gets shown to Gary Gygax, and he looks at it. And what's the combat resolution system for Dungeon? I'm gonna go ahead and read that to you, fellas. This is from my 1975 first edition copy. I recently got this in. Not gonna lie, from the condition of it and the fact that it came from Nevada, I'm guessing somebody took this to Vegas and they wanted a couple more shots at the table. Now, this is from page 3. Let's see. Each monster has a chart printed upon it, which lists 2 wizard spells and 4 dungeon adventure types with various numbers that are opposite of them. The number is the score on 2 dice required to kill the monster. For example, looking at the card which says troll, because the troll is our example, right?
Mhm.
A superhero needs a roll of 8 or more to kill it. A wizard needs a roll of 8 or more to kill it. A hero or elf needs a roll of 10 or more or 9 or more, respectively. And lightning or fireball kill the troll on rolls of dash, has no effect, or 7 or better, respectively. Now, what I just said doesn't line up exactly with the fantasy combat table because I was looking at that a little bit ago. However, this is also a board game. It is meant to be fast, furious, and some family fun because you can't just like expect to walk in and, okay, I'm a superhero. There's a troll. I kill it on a 5. Those are very high odds on 2d6s,
Mhm.
right? Because when there are 2 dice, you have a distribution, right?
Yeah,
Like
you have a pyramid going on.
Yeah. So that's why they try some of this stuff. And Dungeon came out in 1975. Obviously, it's the case that McGarry thought that these rules were good enough to keep pushing this game and not really changing it, right? So, what's going on here? Because McGarry says that, hey, we use this. Wesley says that we use chainmail. And okay, so let's ask this question, John. When it comes to Blackmoor, who's the greatest authority on it? The biggest authority on the Blackmoor game.
Are you talking about like as perceived in the hobby or like really?
Really, because we want to try to get to reality.
I would say that people that played it would be the people you'd want to go to. So the people that are still alive that played in that game.
Yeah. Okay. So luckily, McGarry and Wesley are still living. I look forward to speaking with them in April. I'm very excited about that. And unfortunately, though he has left us, well, Dave Arneson in 1977 produces the first fantasy campaign.
Sure.
And while we should consider it part of his great war against TSR, he does say in there several times that my basic system was chainmail, especially, say, the points per units, because when you're playing these kind of games, you're playing, I think of it as a scale, right? Basically, you got the monarch, you got the general, you got the squad, then you got the character, right?
Mhm.
So if your points for your armies are coming out of chainmail, and then your man-to-man stuff is basically coming out of chainmail, with modifications, of course, it's reasonable to say that they're using, well, chainmail, right?
Yeah, I have something here too. I'll add this. I have some slides here. This one's not as important. I just thought this was an interesting one where, because this slide, I'll run through my slides real quick. They're not super great.
Is that the 50th anniversary book?
It is, yeah.
Okay, hold on.
This is I don't remember what page it's on. This is at the very beginning though, where it's sort of like laying the groundwork. So, because a lot of people like to say that Gary wasn't doing fantasy stuff, but then in these fanzines, and I think it was let me go back over here. Thingordrim, Volume 1, Number 2, and this is from 1969 to 1970. And actually, it gives you a number of pages in the history, the 50th anniversary history of D&D thing, and that's actually quite fun to read because they're doing like this diplomacy of Lord of the Rings, and it sounds, like we make a lot of people make fun of the bros for like
LARPing.
Not just that, but for like the silly things that happen in their games, right? Like Muppets and things like that. And you're reading what these people are doing in like a Middle Earth game, and it sounds just as ridiculous as what the bros are doing. So it's very on brand with how the bros actually game.
Oh, here's an interesting thing. I've never considered diplomacy a war game until I started researching all this. I
Sure.
tried it in college and absolutely hated it. But also, a couple of the guys in the game were seasoned players. And they decided that they were just going to take the victory early on. So, you got to ease people into this, right?
Yeah. But anyways, Gary had his articles about dragons and different types of dragons, and he was continually writing about dragon types, and these dragon types would find their way into 0E eventually. So that was the purpose of that slide, showing that like Gary was already thinking about fantasy gaming in regards to wargaming and adventure gaming. He's writing about it in these diplomacy fanzines that are doing like Lord of the Rings style diplomacy games. So I think it's an interesting thing. This is what we were talking about earlier. I mentioned how people say like, oh, it started as a Bronstein. So this was like from 1970, it's saying. And you had noted something, I think, about this, because there's some quibbles about this date from what I understand.
Yeah, that date is actually incorrect there for 1970. It's supposed to be 1971, and that's also confirmed by the Blackmoor documentary. Arneson, for all his genius, wasn't the best at typing things out. So it's just kind of how things roll, right?
Yeah. So he's saying there'll be a medieval Bronstein, April 17th, 1970, or actually 71, at the home of David Arneson from 1,300 hours to 2,400 hours, with refreshments being available on the usual basis. Players may come at any time, and any number are welcome to attend what should prove to be an exciting time. It will feature mythical creatures and a poker game under the Trolls Bridge between sunup and sundown. So
I can't imagine playing from 1,300 to 2,400. I really can't. 11 hours. Back in October.
I used to game that way. It was good times,
Wow.
but I can't do it anymore. Not with a child and being an adult that likes sleep. But anyway, sorry, I interrupted.
My youth group, gosh, just a couple of weeks ago, we did a long planned sleepover, and it was an 11-hour party.
That's awesome.
It took me like a week to recover, but we had a lot of fun. I got to play a game of Warhammer in the middle of it with one of the other chapter dads, and they play a lot of video games, Nazi zombies, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I love the long games. I miss them. My games now end up being like at a minimum of like 2 hours to like 4 at the most usually, because that's about all we can handle as adults with children and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've settled on 3 myself. Yeah,
but yeah. Shane here says, and I think you said this is from the Blackmoor documentary where the typo is confirmed in the documentary, because a lot of people like to cite this. So it means that like they're running these. There could have been Bronsteins before this. Who knows? I don't know. But
it was considered a general game type eventually.
Yeah, so there could have been some before this, but in 1971, they used this typo. A lot of people I think have used this typo to sort of state like there's this time where it was this Bronstein game, and then it became a chainmail game, which for the record does not change my position, and it does not change my view of the game. I fully acknowledge it. It's here in the history book that it didn't start as a chainmail game. It doesn't affect the position at all. It doesn't affect the argument at all. I just wanted to point that out. But I do find it interesting. It just this false date or this typo does mean that the Bronstein gets a lot closer to the chainmail game, in my opinion, because chainmail came out around this time.
Right. So what we're dealing with is the fact that there's this guy Arneson, and he's got these Avalon Hill games, middle class, right? He's got a lot of models, and he winds up doing very well in his wargaming group, to where he effectively becomes its president. And what he is doing, because Avalon Hill's releases are so slow, is he is constantly tinkering, adding things in, and they're iterating and playing the entire time. And the Twin Cities groups are having a lot of fun with this, even though there are some internal quibbles. Because, just because there is a Bronstein doesn't mean that adding in chainmail later negates the Bronstein. No, it's just part of that soup. It's a big soup.
I mean, the way a lot of bros advocate for running Bronsteins is like you're having your adventure, conventional game over here. The players, they're exploring dungeons and there's a war game going on. But you might have a special event night where you do a Bronstein, you pass out some high-level characters to people that are the mover and shakers in your campaign world, and you like let people go hog wild and see what happens. And then that affects the main game, the full game, because all those decisions that people make as these mover and shakers affect even the adventurers that are out there, like that are just delving in dungeons.
I think that's wondering if you could do something like this with Warhammer, because there's an old world RPG now. You do that same kind of thing. I don't know if it would work, but it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, I mean, you have like BattleTech too. I think I've heard of people doing BattleTech Bronsteins over their BattleTech war games, and then they, you have Mech Warrior, which is like the RPG side of that world and that game. So I think that you could kind of do that. I think there's a lot of what I would call like vestigial organs in some of these games that are harkening back to what we're talking about here. And people don't understand, like, where did this come from? Why is it like this? And it's like, well, this is how people did games back then. That's why.
They played diplomacy by mail. They would write out letters and send them to each other to do moves. And they would write them as the monarch, as the leader of that country, because these history nerds went that hard.
Yeah. So yeah, we have this slide here. This is just interesting to me. It's because, let me make this bigger here. It's hard to tell, but the number one person there is King, is Rob Kuntz, and this is from 1971. So chainmail is already out, and this is from the Castles and Crusades Society. And then this is what we were talking about here. My Natural One's logo is kind of covering it, but it's Gary Gygax. We had mentioned this earlier after I think they had experienced chainmail since 1972. Writes a postcard to Dave Arneson and is like, yeah, like, what are these rules? You know, how does this work? And then we have Arneson's reply below, which says, as to chainmail modifications, they were fairly minor, and the big change was laying out the dungeon for exploration. I've cited this interaction over and over again because to me, like, this is just the nail in the coffin. It should be, at least, I think, for people that are trying to rewrite the history of these sorts of things. I think it's the most powerful receipt that we have here. It's from the mouths of everyone involved, and they're like, yeah, we use chainmail.
Right, because unfortunately, when the timeline is concerned, we have to be very suspicious of both Gygax and Arneson after Arneson leaves because of what happened in November of 1976. Because both of them try to say, no, it was me, Austin, the whole time, that kind of a thing.
Mm. No, but this is when they're still friendly to each other. This is when they are still speaking warmly about each other and to each other. So I think that it's definitely relevant to take this into consideration in 72. They're still on good terms, and they're just about, because we're going to get to a year later. Well, before that, we have the 72 to 73 here. And this article here, if you want to go to it, theorizes about this character sheet in a couple ways, in some interesting ways. And it's from 2012, hence the date here, which I find fascinating because and this is Pete Gaylord's Wizard. And my logo again is covering it up. I'm sorry. From 1972 to 73 in Blackmoor. And what's interesting about this character sheet, we were talking about this. I asked this question on the Discord server this morning because I just wanted to get some insight from people. But we have what is listed here, all these weapons: a dagger, a hand axe, mace, sword, battle axe. And what's interesting is all these weapons are listed in the same order as they appear on chainmail's man-to-man table, in as far as like weapon class, I believe, which is super interesting to me. But the numbers next to them don't line up. So to the man-to-man tables, they seem to like vary slightly. But to me, these all seem like 2d6 ranges for various weapons, which is super fascinating to me. The only thing that I can theorize is that he's basing this, and this is the article that I have on screen here from bogswood.blogspot, is that these are skills that were derived from the no armor attack matrix, and that maybe there was some sort of way that armor affected either via a save, so they weren't using the full man-to-man table, or there was some sort of armor class system which Arneson was using. So
yeah, I'm actually looking at the man-to-man melee table, and that does line up. That's really interesting.
And so this is the Wizard Gaylord. This is from 72 to 73. So to me, it's quite clear that by the time the game is starting to take the form that we would kind of know it as Dungeons and Dragons, what would be its final form in 0E, they're using chainmailism type, at least influenced things. I'm totally willing to acknowledge that Arneson probably wasn't playing chainmail rules written. He's clearly like adapting it to fit what he wants it to do. But that this is just I'm theorizing here, but I do think that these are just skills with these weapons that this character has, and that these are to hit numbers on 2d6. So that's just my view, but that's my theorizing. I will admit that that's theorizing. I do think that there's some chainmail influence here because these things, while these numbers don't match up, again, they are listed in the same order as they appear for chainmail in the man-to-man tables.
Yeah. Let me toss one more thing in there. This fantasy stuff, how does it really get into people's consciousness? Well, these people are also voracious readers. We finally get non-bootleg copies of Tolkien coming into the States. And naturally, fans of The Hobbit want to recreate the Battle of the Five Armies, don't they?
Sure.
Well, we have, let's see, it's not Pratt, it's Pat with his Tolkien rules. And those seem to be really coming out in October of 1970. Now, it's just a couple page spread, but it just so happens to be that these were very well received to where there's a note, and I'm going to just read this real quick. This is from one of the issues of The Courier. However, I've not been able to find a copy of it or a PDF of it online just yet. I was led to Drive-Thru RPG, but it was conspicuously absent, most likely because of the copywritten Tolkien stuff. But let me just go ahead and read this editorial note here. The New England Wargamers Association won the Arnowitz Award for the Best of Show at the Philadelphia Wargame Convention this past October for its presentation of this war game developed by Pat. Chris Pratt is just always in the back of my mind, so I keep thinking about that. It's like, come on, do a dance. But you've got these guys playing diplomacy, they're playing war games, and then this comes out. It's like, okay, what would it look like if we actually had some of that stuff, right? If we had hobbits, if we had dwarves, and we had orcs all fighting over a mountain full of gold because the dragon's dead. And what if there's a siege, like a particular siege of Bodenberg? Gygax saw that at Gen Con 1 in 1968. Meets Arneson after that, 1969 at Gen Con. And so you got this working relationship. These guys are exchanging letters. They're playing in each other's games to some extent because you got these letters going back and forth because of the diplomacy game that the LGTSA was participating in. Because, let's see, Kuntz was the treasurer, and then like Gygax was the Secretary of State or President, something like that. And they are talking about how they're going to change this stuff from time to time. They test things, and if they don't work, they kind of toss it on the wayside and try something else.
Mm-hmm.
Which is that iteration stuff, because it keeps coming up. Because there's a big market that's not being satisfied, and Gygax eventually latches onto it like an eagle and doesn't let it go, and eventually produces OD&D with the two drafts, the 1973 one, which I know you did a video on, and then the 1974 game that we know, and most people, I think, love.
Yeah, there's one more slide here because this answers, we're talking about the 73 draft, because this answers this person's question here. And also, I meant to thank my ear trumpet for gifting that membership. I appreciate it, man. As always, your generosity, and congrats to Squirrel Hermit. I think got it. So Grimy Son of a Groin says, Devil's Advocate here. If Raw was intended by Arneson and Gygax in 0E, then if Raw was intended by Arneson and Gygax in 0E, why include an alternative combat system? Well, this kind of answers your question, I think, your Devil's Advocate question here. Let me enlarge this a little bit. So he gives you this 3-step tier, and it's really, quite honestly, a shame that this section never... There's lots of sections like this in the previous drafts of OD&D that you're sort of like, man, if only this had made it into the final draft, so many questions would be not in dispute at this point. But I do think that it's still valuable because it points to the intention of the rules as they were designed, right? So he gives you these 3-tier things where he says, men to men, if there are small numbers fighting, it will be best, this is on page 22, It will be most interesting to use the man-to-man melee tables. If large numbers are fighting, the combat table based on troop ratio for 1 to 20 should be used. Men versus fantasy creatures. It is suggested that a 1 to 20 combat that the 1 to 20 combat tables be used, with men scoring 1 hit point when they hit, and fantasy figures, scoring a hit equal to the die roll 1 to 6. Of course, some fantasy figures cannot be hit by normal men, and no hit points will be scored against them. See the fantasy versus fantasy section below. And then so the fantasy versus fantasy section says, because of the vast number of fantastic creatures and levels of men, a matrix to show hits is totally impractical. We know because we tried, but with 70 or more categories, it becomes too unwieldy to handle. So they're like the old 2d6 target number fantasy table isn't going to work. So then they go to this method here. They say, we therefore recommend that a system utilizing a 20-sided die, increments of 5%, be adopted. So you're supposed to be using a d20, and we have to note at the time historically that d20s only went 0 to 9 twice on them. They didn't have 1 to 20 yet. So these were d10s that were being used. So there's actually some articles out there from the time of zines where people misunderstood this, and they were rolling 2d10 and rolling them as like 2d10 and adding the two 10s together, which obviously gives you, again, a pyramid peaking at 11, which makes some of these to hit numbers impossible to hit. So this just goes to show that people very early on were not understanding OD&D. They didn't understand what they didn't understand what it was.
Well, what we also have to deal with is access to some of these specialized dice, because the D20 was almost experimental for a fair amount of time, but you do get that granular 5% each time, so you get a bigger spread of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. But I think the 5% spread shows, like, because someone had in my comment section a while back had said, where in the 3 LBBs does it tell you to use a D20 1 to 20? And it's like, well, it's not super explicit. It was because it was edited out. It was just assumed that you would know, because there's other points where it says increments of 5%. I think there's a magic item. I think it's a displacement cloak where it says a +2 is equal to a 10% bonus. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, well, it's that only works if you're rolling a D20 as a 20-sided die as we commonly understand them today. But anyways, it says, we therefore recommend that a system utilizing a 20-sided die, increments of 5%, be adopted. The basis of this will be the assumption that a man will require a score of 90% or better, hit on opponents in plate mail and shield. Armor classes will be given in such a way as to indicate their efficiency, viz., deduct their number from 20, and the base number to hit them is obtained. Thus, plate mail and shield is class 2, and 2 minus 20 equals 18. This was obviously changed to be 19. They moved it down a point. AD&D would go back up to being like this. Each fantasy figure is listed below, giving its base armor class along with various other data regarding it. Armor classes and what score the various levels of fighting man need to score a hit are, and then it gives you this table on the side we see on the screen. So like this to me shows that you were supposed to, rules as written wise at least, you were supposed to use chainmail 2d6, and this is pure taste for me. This is why I didn't do this in white box. But rules as written per the 1973 draft, you're clearly supposed to be using like the d6 method of like 2d6 for man to man for like non-fantastical combat, and that's just like your characters are out there and you're fighting orcs or goblins. These aren't like super amazing creatures that you're fighting. They're attacking as level 1 normal men. You're supposed to be using 2d6. You're supposed to be using the d6 dice pool system where it's like you roll a d6 and based on troop matchup, it's like a 5 to 6 is a kill for that unit type for every dice rolled. You're supposed to be using that. And then when you get to the fantastical creatures, that's when the d20 comes in. So my white box game does not follow this because I personally don't like this method.
You don't want to have like 3 combat resolution methods with their own charts?
No, thank you. I'd rather just dump everything. I think you can dump everything onto what the D20 or what's called the alternative combat system, which is what I do in Whitebox. But a lot of the chainmailisms that you would use in these other systems, like the D6 dice pool or the 2D6 man-to-man, can be overlaid the D20. But this is super interesting to me. I think it's truly a shame that like this section never made it in, because again, this would be like another nail in the coffin between like, is chainmail required or not? Like right here, it's explicitly telling you that this alternative combat system is alternative only to the 2D6 fantasy table. You're still using chainmail for other aspects of resolution here. And this is in 1973. And again, we just showed that character sheet from 1972 to 73, where there's a lot of chainmailisms on that character sheet. I think these are all like key important historical points and points of data that we need to sort of be aware of, right? Like we can't just ignore this, in my opinion.
Why? Are you saying a draft implies some intent of the author?
I would say so, yes.
Oh, well, that's something else. Yeah,
that's a crazy theory, I know, but
yeah,
I want to real quick though. I want to thank
Wow.
Agile Monk for gifting 5 memberships. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. And then my ear
Awesome.
trumpet gifted another one as well. If you guys are, I need to be I need to be better about it. It's been hard with fulfilling the Kickstarter, so I've not been very good about interacting on the patron side, the supporter side of the Discord server. But if you do sign up on Discord and connect your YouTube account to Discord, you'll automatically, there's a bot there that'll automatically give you all the privileges you need to get access to the super elite backend that I neglect and need to get better at with. But I appreciate the support, guys. It really helps this sort of historical research that we're kind of going to and getting the message out. It means a lot. Anyways, you were saying, Dom, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Well, I think we can say that we're carrying on the nitty-gritty spirit of the before times. So
That's the goal.
I mean, it's a fair point, I think. And because of it, we get to link it up to wargaming, which is what I'm actually doing in my book. Now, we've got this. We have the 1973 draft. I haven't looked at this just yet, but I am wondering right now, because Gygax is actually very good with these tables, and it's part of why he was a good insurance guy. Did he know his costs so well that when he was doing a revision for 1974, he might have altered the page number, the total number of pages across the 3 LBBs, in order to be able to actually get it to market with what money they had?
I think so.
And
I
wind
think
up with, like, you start off with $1,000, it becomes $2,000 more once you get Brian Bloom, and that eventually is able to get them those copies. And now all of a sudden, we're off to the races. He's got to sell these. And it takes about 11 months.
I think it's not just that, but I think like in the 1970s at the time, when in 73 when they're writing this draft, or right before they release, and even at release, I think of OD&D, I don't think I don't think that Gary was like, we got a winner here, guys. Like, this is going to be huge. You know, I think there was that hope, but I also think that the way Zero E is written, it's clearly written for wargamers who already have a context, who would already look at chainmail in there and go, oh, I got to get this other game to fill in these gaps. And that those people that would buy, a wargamer that would buy Zero E would look at the rules and go, there's some holes here, and it's telling me to buy this other game. This other game that is prior to this probably fills in the gaps. It keeps, because the rules themselves, there's multiple places where it references chainmail explicitly in the 3 LBBs. So, for instance, the Ghoul entry, it mentions it. So there's tons of entries that mention Zero E, and this is all the way up even into the book the supplement that Rob Kuntz would co-author, which is Greyhawk. They're still the weapon versus armor tables are still they explicitly say they're derived from chainmail. You still have fighting capability, which is from chainmail in there. So it's like this rewrite of history just annoys me. I'm hoping that a lot of this evidence and all of these things that we're pointing out in this timeline of events that are leading up to the creation of Zero E and its release kind of paint a more cohesive picture than I think what a lot of people claim. I hope, but anyways, my point was that like Gary was writing a game where he expected you to read the rules, and I think sort of infer from that, oh, I need this other game. It's telling me at the very start that I need chainmail. And once you do that, you read chainmail and you're like, oh, this idea of I made a video about this called the dagger dilemma, where all weapons in Zero E do a d6 of damage. A dagger weighs less and it costs less, but it does just as much damage as a two-handed sword. And if all you're using is the alternative combat system with nothing from chainmail, not even weapon class, there's no reason why you would ever buy a two-handed sword. There's no reason why you would ever buy a spear. There's no reason why you'd ever buy any other melee weapon than a dagger. And so what would be the point of that other than flavor? But once you look at chainmail, and even if you incorporate weapon class over the top of it and you're only using the D20 system, already you get a more complex system where you're getting parrying, multiple attacks, and lots of other interesting things that kind of make every weapon does a D6 not be a problem if you're using the bare bones alternative combat system, which shows that the alternative combat system was still reliant on chainmail. And I think that that's key. Anyways, that's my rant.
Faceless on a Throne has an interesting comment. The naval combat calls for using the man-to-man combat after boarding.
There you go.
Oh. So we even get naval combat in this game?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just, by land, we also get by sea?
Yeah, we got naval combat. We have aerial combat. Which aerial combat mentions that weapons or bombs that are dropped from flying creatures are equivalent to catapults or certain things like that. Guess what? Zero E doesn't have any catapults in it, and it doesn't tell you how catapults work. But guess what does tell you how catapults work and where they're at? It's in chainmail. So,
Matt, how do I find this rule? Catapult. It's in here. But no, that is indicative of some things with war games even today. Where the information is not always the best expressed. So whenever I'm looking up rules for Warhammer the Old World, I have to cross-reference a few things. But while I'm talking about Warhammer the Old World, their casting system is quite interesting. It's 2d6, and then you add a number, and then you see if you cast a spell or not. It's remarkably close to the complex casting rules in chainmail. And those values don't seem to have changed all that much in 50 years. Which, luckily, I played Dwarves because F Magic. So they recently nerfed Wizards, and the Dwarves have magic resistance. So I get to really enjoy not having spells go off against my army.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and what's interesting, too, I just want to shout it out, too. I can't reach it over here because I got a bunch of equipment in the way. Yeah. But
that's a Blood Bowl.
The on my shelf over here, like it's kind of right off camera on my third or second from the bottom shelf here, where I'm pointing. There's Tony Bath's Ancient Wargaming, and so this book, which is really fascinating, gives a shout out. I mean, as bad as this book is in the introduction and the foreword, it does present a lot of historical documents. So I think if you can stomach the introduction and the forward, it's a very useful book if you're interested in the history of D&D. But just I don't know, get a marker and block out the first 2 pages or whatever.
Very carefully cut them out.
Yeah.
Go away, Tondro. Go away.
But Peterson. it gives a shout out to Tony Bath in this. So it's important to, like, I think for Tony Bath to not lose his place in a lot of this, because a lot of these games wouldn't exist without him and Don Featherstone as well. So
yeah, because there's also a lot of cross-pollination that happens across the good old Atlantic Sea.
Yeah, you have to cut out the woke junk, but it's a good book nonetheless. Like you get a lot of really interesting information in this book and a lot of commentary, side stories, and things like that I think paint a cohesive picture that's super super duper interesting to me. So,
do you know how to make GIFs? Because Movie Guy John said that we need some GIFs of just pulling out chainmail.
For every kind of what about? Yeah, I probably should do that. That'd be funny. So I think like we've been going for almost an hour here. I don't know if this stream's going to go the full 2 hours, but I don't know. Is there anything in the timeline that we missed, Dom, that you didn't get to that you think that we should cover? Because I think like we showed that it started probably as a Bronstein. It's fine. It doesn't negate this, but it's very clear based on like the troll example with Arneson getting called out and from the horse's mouth multiple times during this time, even after there's a falling out between Gary and Dave, that chainmail is that Arneson still admits to using chainmail. You know, this is I'm always flabbergasted when people like continue to make this claim that it's not necessary when it's clearly necessary.
Yeah, I think I would like to add in some events that happened in 1970.
Sure.
Because what's really difficult is demonstrating how often these guys would write into magazines and then get responses and then treat it like an internet forum in which they would just flame each other back and forth. But what we do know about 1970 is that in April, the LGTSA rules get printed in Panzerfaust. Okay. In that month, Arneson joins the LGTSA. And also in that time period, he's doing that Napoleonics campaign that eventually he says he gets bored of. In July of that year, you have the Doomsday Book, and then they basically reprint those rules so the members all get them. So then the question winds up being, okay, time goes on, and then in October of that year is when you get Pat's wargame rules for Tolkien. So if you're playing wargames constantly, and then all of a sudden you've got rules coming up to at least have orcs and ents and dwarves, and it starts being really interesting. Well, I think it's rather clear because everybody, I think, is aware that the fantasy supplement is kind of tacked on towards the end, and it seems to be rather late in development because Perrin didn't like fantasy. And because of that, you end up getting chainmail with a fantasy supplement in 1971 because you have that thirst for fantasy combat within the wargaming community. So that's that seems to be rather important as far as I'm concerned, because eventually, because of that, you wind up getting all these references to chainmail that we've been talking about this entire time.
Yeah, you know, and it's not to say that like everything is chainmail. Like it's obvious that there's a lot of influences from different places. Like it's always peculiar to me too that I just want to point this out. Like if I say outdoor survival is really important for understanding 0E D&D, you don't really get as much pushback on that. It's super interesting to me that the same people that will push back on chainmail against you will be like, oh yeah, outdoor survival is cool. And to me, and this is just me theorizing, I think a lot of it just comes from anti-Gygax sentiments, which, look, I get it. He wasn't a saint. He wasn't a perfect guy. But like, we also can't, because of these foibles in character that we might perceive in a character, can't, like, erase these other aspects of the game or impute, I think, negative motive to these sorts of things. Perrin didn't want to grope through black pits. Yeah.
Oh no.
That's from the introduction where Gary says, like, this game is for those that want to grope through black pits like John Carter in the Barsoom stories. So that's a fun reference. At the very least, you got to use camel smell rules from Tony Bath. Like, are you even playing rules as written if you're not using camel smell rules? You know?
Having never smelled a camel, I'm worried.
Yeah, you know, to me, it's just interesting though that you could say, oh, you know, outdoor survival is super critical to the development of D&D, because again, in this slide here, where Arneson responds on the bottom here, he talks about how he used the D6 rolls in outdoor survival to determine random encounters. Like, that's when random encounters would happen, was based off of the rules from outdoor survival. And obviously he's using the game board and things like that as well. So, and that game board would become iconic to OD&D. You know, you still have to this day people that like make clones of that board, use it in their home fantasy games. I think Greg Gillespie's Barrow Maze, I think it's called, aspects of that map are borrowed from parts of the Outdoor Survival Board. So it's still relevant to this day. But people don't have a problem when you say that. But the moment like you say, hey, you got to use chainmail to fill in these gaps, like people lose their minds. It's super weird to me. Or that it doesn't matter to the development of D&D. You don't need it. It's just, I think that one reason why I'm so passionate about this is I really think that people are missing out on some fun from this old historical thing. Like, we have to ask the question, historically speaking, why did this game catch on? Why did the Blackmoor bunch like have so much fun playing in Dave's games? Why did this game eventually catch on, even in a misunderstood form, as many played it in 0E? And it's like, well, there's something there that's like obviously still there in those rules. It's super engaging and magical.
Right. And even though the wargaming aspect gradually slips away, kind of like I was talking with Harmony, it's still vestigial. You can find some references to that stuff in, say, the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide, where it's got some rules for, do you want to have your own abbey? Do you want to have a castle? Here's some cost and gold pieces, and you can then figure out how long it's going to take to build that. But this notion of being a monarch, doing nation building, being a general, and being an adventurer, they ate it up. And a lot of people took to the game. They have latched on to the I am just one person. Eventually became I'm just one person and I'm a super special person. I'm going to save the world. But that's just how it's gone. But we got to also figure out how they originally played it. And a lot of that comes from those original games. And
Yeah,
what they wrote about it.
I think the vestigial organs start to make a lot more sense. And like, even if you are still, this is always my thing too, with any piece of advice that I give on how to run your games, despite the accusations towards me that I'm a one true wayist, is that even if you're not playing a game like exactly like me, you may get some benefit from incorporating some of these, like understanding where these vestigial organs of the game came from and how they work, and then applying them to your game. Like, maybe you do want to do like a Battle Bronstein. Maybe you do want to do like a mass battle, and you need mechanics for that. You're running like a old school game. Those things exist. You can go find them. So yeah, I don't know. It's just I only bring these things up because I think the history is important, but I also think that even if you're not playing a game exactly like me, some of these ideas might still be beneficial to even your more conventional game as you described it, where I'm the character, I'm the chosen one, I'm going to save the world. Like, you can still have mass battles. You can still have all these things going on in a game like that and have lots of fun. So
I had something like that actually come up when I was running the Rise of the Drow campaign, which is probably my favorite 5th edition adventure. We had a TPK. It was nasty. The party, we set up new characters. They began in an underground dwarven city. Then they decided, we don't want to do that again, so we'll come back later. They decided to go up to the surface, and basically you're in a kingdom that's obviously like Russia. And what we started doing was they would go, they do jobs, you have a job board, that kind of a thing. And because I had been reading the Rule Cyclopedia a fair amount, I just started overlaying some of those systems to where we did domain play. And they really got into it because it's a corrupt kingdom, would just buy baronies for cheap. They're on the edges of civilization, and they were just expected to deal with anything they would roll for. They got income on it, and to my surprise, they did two things. One, they invested heavily in infrastructure that I then gave them dates that it would be completed. And two, they screwed with each other a fair amount, because one of the guys took their wizard sweatshop and put it in his domain, and the other guys wanted to steal the instructors. Absolutely hilarious. We'd start rolling for that kind of a thing, and sometimes something would happen. It's like, oh, hey, that person disappeared. What's up with that?
I mean,
And
that's
they
super
really
cool.
enjoyed it.
That sounds like the kind of stuff that like the Blackmoor bunch, like it's very much in the spirit of like the kinds of things that you'd see in these old games. And yeah, even if you're trying to run a conventional game, I think understanding this historical stuff can really make your game better, more fun. So
Yeah, I didn't even really push that style of game. I had made a suggestion that, hey, look, if you guys want to get in with the court and actually get near the czar, you got to have a title. How are you going to get a title? Go talk to the title guy. Yeah, I'm gonna need $5,000. I'll get you a Barony. Sweet. Where's it at? All the way out there. And then we actually went through, we rolled for what was in there, and sometimes they actually struck pay dirt to where you had enough mineral wealth to actually have a fair amount of cash. And then the other guys might want that.
Yeah,
But
I
that's
mean,
also a different aspect to this old style of wargaming play, where it is a competitive game. You do expect the rules to be enforced, because that way, the jerk behind the screen isn't pushing the game in favor of one player or another. You attempt the thing, you see if you succeed, and that's the end of it. And more importantly, for the most part, they abide by those things, right? The results of it, because that's also kind of how things go with war in history. You've got to deal with, a failure, and then you got to figure out how to turn that into a success. Kind of like, if you look at the American Civil War, you go back and forth and back and forth.
yeah, this is another point because you brought up it's a war game. There's going to be competition and things like that. And I brought this up before. Even Ben Milton has made this point. He doesn't get to this conclusion, but he at least makes this point. And that's that Zero E says this is a game for up to 50 players. So what are you doing in that kind of game when you have 50 people in a single campaign? Obviously, they're not all playing 50 at the same time, but you probably have this revolving roster of players that are coming down and doing dungeon delves and adventures. But you also have players in the background. Like if you watch the Secrets of Blackmoor documentary, they talk about in that, like, running the Napoleonics campaign, and how I think Greg Svensson says I think he was Spain, he says in that documentary, and how he had calculated all of his finances and as the ruler of Spain, and he was doing all kinds of stuff like that. And they would call Arneson up on the phone and be like, I want to make this move and I want to do this. And so this game was like always on. They're always doing this. And so you have multiple people making these choices, and then they'd go to the sand table when there'd be like an inevitable sort of meetup of armies.
Yeah.
We got to play this out.
If it is the case that armies will clash, there's going to be at Dave Arneson's house a war game, and you would have one person playing a commander, and the other guys playing like lieutenants, because that's also kind of like Kriegspiel, because that's how those rules worked as well. I actually do have a note from the last time I watched the Blackmoor documentary, and they say at one point they had 60 people or around that in this Napoleonics campaign. And that is a tremendous amount of work, but also requires strict timekeeping. So you can also guarantee to the players that what they do is going to be respected, because if you send a missive from, say, the United States to Europe, it's going to take you like 6 to 8 weeks for it to get there, right?
Sure.
So you also have to have some lead time for some of this stuff. And by doing that, it winds up being that more simulationist sort of deal.
Yeah. But I bring up that too, because if you have 60 people in this Napoleonics campaign, you have 50 people in a D&D campaign. You at the very least need consistency. Like if you are going to change things around, you at the very least need to be consistent and fair. You can't be like willy-nilly, like you said, favoring one player. No one's going to want to play in your game if that happens,
Right. And this is why it seems to be the case that the game coalesces around Arneson, is because he can read the rules and apply them fairly, and people also have a good time because of that. But it takes some growing pains. You also have some clashing personalities, but it eventually gives us D&D.
Yeah. And again, chainmail is a big part of that as a war game and as a resolution method, as we've shown in this stream with historical documents and from the horse's mouth and from people that were there, at the time. And so it kind of comes to this question, because there's going to be people that are going to say these things, and you have to sort of, I guess I leave this to you, the viewer, that's out there watching live right now or at some point down the line. You have to make this decision for yourself about who you're going to listen to and who you're going to trust about the history of this stuff and how you're going to apply it. I'm a big dummy online. I get things wrong. But you can listen to what I'm saying and other people that are similar to me and have come to similar conclusions saying, or you can listen to other people. But I'm hopeful that what we presented here kind of shows that I hope it shows that history is sort of more on how we say things sort of played out. Even though we weren't there, I was barely a twinkle in my father's eye at that during that time, if at all.
I didn't realize you were a Twink L.
Geez.
Oh, I'm sorry. Look, I've not done a pun the entire stream, okay?
No, that was a good burn.
But
Like badoom, yeah. But yeah, you know, hopefully the history bears us out, and you know, we've delved into this because it's one of those things, and I want to say that like the intention of this isn't to make other people's experiences less than from the time. If you had fun and you weren't using chainmail, yeah, I'll twink. Oh man, I'm never gonna live that down now. If you're having fun during the time, like that's great. But I think that this stuff still matters, and I think that these historical points and timeline of events and things are critical to figuring these things out. And I think that we discovered that there's a really interesting and cool game that was being played that's sort of been lost. There's a lost D&D, right, that has been lost. And I think that by getting our timeline correct and understanding it, we sort of get to that lost D&D. And I think it's worth at least exploring what that lost D&D was.
yeah, and you know, this is even the case despite some memories not exactly being all that great anymore. Because even if we say listen to the Blackmoor bunch and kind of correlate what they all claim, it's difficult to pin down some dates. At best, we can say, you know, it looks like we were doing this in the 70, 71, 72 time period. Even if we can't exactly put some months to things, but we know how they're playing. We know that there are going to be certain references when they write something out, because that's why we have to go through oral and also documentary sources. So we get to look at interviews, we get to look at the stuff that they wrote, and unfortunately, some of these magazines you just can't get a hold of anymore. So when we were talking about doing this stream, I thought to myself, I'm going to see if I can finally drum up like a Doomsday book to look at. And so I started checking, and considering that one of the copies of the Doomsday book went to auction for like 18 grand, they are now collector's items. And so at best we get some stuff from, say, a big collection like this, no matter what we might dislike about it or how heavy it is. Like, I dislike this thing as a book. But we then get to compare it to what other things are going on. And in some cases, we also have to consider, you know, who has the time to actually read the rules and apply them? Who's the best at doing that? Why does Arneson become the big cheese?
Thank you for the $10, Planet Tobor. You guys are doing a great job. Thank you. We're trying, you know, like, we have our biases, I think, and we have our mistakes again that we make, but we're trying the best we can. And, you know, like they got heated in conversations with people in the past about this stuff. And there's been moments where I've misunderstood people, and I've apologized to those people. Because like, oh, I misunderstood what you said, and I didn't. Then it painted everything that you said after that in a certain way, and that's not fair of me. So, you know, I hope that goodwill comes through in what we're saying, as like maybe vitriolic and vociferous, if I'll use some big words, as we might become with certain things. But you know, it doesn't change the intention. You know, I think, for example, like Dom here, he kickstarted his History of D&D book, and he's been researching it and writing it. Like, he's doing it because, you know, he's passionate about the hobby, and he feels like there needs to be a correction. There needs to at least be this other voice making this other argument in that sort of sphere of the hobby, you know. And I think you all should check out his book once it releases. I don't know if you're still doing late pledges or anything like that, but people should check out your work, I think. At least your Substack.
Yeah, so you can currently pledge still for the PDF. So you can check Kickstarter. It is Dungeons & Dragons: An American Institution. My goal is for it to be finished next July. And with that, to be a fantastic book that synthesizes most of the stuff that people have already written, while also going into more detail about the wargaming that gave birth to it. I also argue against some stuff that Peterson does, and also some other guys who have some pull when it comes to writing the history of the hobby. But also part of the issue I take with a fair number of these guys is the reason that they can get a hold of some of these materials is because they happen to have connections to Wizards of the Coast who have a particular interest in having the books written in a particular way. And I find that objectionable. So this is entirely independent. This is just me doing my thing. But that also means that I wind up lacking some sources. And I also do have to reference certain things that I don't have, a copy of. So it's just what you got to deal with.
I put your Substack and so it's right here. You can go to a Substack, and then if you're interested in the PDF for his Kickstarter, it's right here. So the book is Dungeons and Dragons: An American Institution. And Dom again has done like incredible amounts of research. He's purchased books, and he's looking at it even more in depth than me. Like he's more interested. The reason why I wanted him on is he's more interested in a lot of this historical stuff and the back and forth. And I'm more interested in mechanics, obviously, from a design perspective. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of looking at it from like different lenses here, but I think like both are very critical in sort of understanding the origin of the game and the hobby, and I guess if people want to learn more, I need to get into it, but was there like any podcasts you'd recommend? What is the podcast that you've talked about a bit that kind of is like the oral history, and it seems like it's really good?
Yeah, When We Were Wizards.
Okay,
that is from Paul Stormberg and some other fellow whose name escapes me at the moment. It is 14 episodes, and it's pretty well worth listening to. And while I don't like how in the first several episodes it seems to be the podcast of the virtues of everybody not Gary Gygax, there is good information because they do a lot of interviews and they just let people talk, right? So what was going on at this period? What is happening? My most recent listen to it changed my opinion of Mary Jo herself, because unfortunately it seems to be the case that once success does come, she's entirely dissatisfied because she doesn't seem to know what to do with herself once they actually have money. And there's also a stage, if you listen to this podcast, where she flat out admits that she was dragging out their divorce because she was trying to get Gary back. And if you're a man, that really doesn't sit well with you, because what he had to wind up doing was paying around 10 grand a month to support her, because basically she got their fancy house, and then they had these beautiful horses that she would take care of. And there's a lot of good information there. Sometimes I think it does go too personal. However, it can still be relevant.
Well, these are human characters doing, in history, they have human foibles. And again, Gary wasn't a saint. None of these guys are saints, but I think
there was something I was going to talk about chainmail.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, so in Slaying the Dragon by Ben Riggs, there is a reference to piles of cocaine at the D&D mansion. Okay, I had to get the dungeon master from Flint Dilley to then go through and find that one reference, because there wasn't a page given in Slaying the Dragon. There is actually a point in that book where Dilley talks about how he would go to the mansion and they would be playing games of chainmail. If the game is so bad, as a lot of people say, that's kind of strange, because there's a fair amount of guys, going to the D&D mansion to still play it. Mm-hmm. Even a guy like Tim Castle considered himself mainly a war gamer, and that's how they met, was because of chainmail.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people, I think, I've talked about like Sandy Peterson, for example, who kind of takes a dump. I don't know why he does, because he's like so influential in his own little sphere over there as the creator of Call of Cthulhu. I don't feel like he needs to denigrate chainmail, and he doesn't need to denigrate D&D as a game, because he's over there.
If they've ever played a war game, if they're a war gamer.
He says he was, like, I don't know. He says he used swords and spells or something like that. And he made a tweet a while back about he went to a tournament and found some loophole orcs and then got kicked out. He seems like he's one of the...
I recall this now. If a guy came with a list like that, I would kick him out. Not gonna lie. I've TO'd for Warhammer tournaments. No, you're playing by the rules. Come
on. And he even says in that tweet that the response he got was what he should have gotten, which was he got kicked out. But yeah. I think it comes down to there's a lot of like emotional vested interest in a lot of this stuff. And so even if you're trying to comb through this stuff, because like we're younger and we weren't there. So we're trying to comb through this stuff with a fine tooth comb. We're doing this like D&D archaeology, but a lot of the OGs that were there are still alive. And so sort of when you go through this sort of stuff, you might get some pushback, you might get some anger from people that were there during that time, either as designers themselves or they were gamers there during that time. And the intention again isn't to make you feel bad or something like that. It's just, it's just a pursuit of the origins of the game and what it was. And if that means it's sort of a byproduct, if it means that like the way you played wasn't 100% correct, that the intention isn't to make you feel bad though. And at least from my perspective and what I'm trying to do. I think for the most people, what people are trying to do, there might be a couple people that want to dunk on you, but that's not necessarily me. I can be harsh and vocal at times, but it's oftentimes that I'm trying to work on it. And me just giving you the same energy back that you gave me. So,
paying in their own coin, right?
Yeah, exactly. You give me some energy, I'm going to give you that energy back, and that's not always the right response. I'll admit that, but it's a natural human response in a lot of respects. Again, they were human back then, as we talked about, and we are human now, 50 years later, still. So, we still make human mistakes and have human foibles. But I don't know. Is there anything else you wanted to add? I don't have anything else. I feel like we kind of covered with broad brushes. Some of this is evidence I've shown in the past, but I think it's good to again come back to it and sort of lay it all out. So I don't know if there's anything we missed that you feel needs to be kind of thrown in this timeline of events.
I don't think so in particular, because we're focusing on the development of chainmail. We have mentioned the siege of Bodenberg. We have talked about Perrin a bit, what's going on over in the Twin Cities, what's going on in Lake Geneva. And some of the stuff is difficult to put together because we have to go back through what they wrote. And in some cases, you can't find it anymore because it was just on, a couple pieces of paper.
Yeah, I think this is in regards to Sammy. He tried to break the game instead of cooperate. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is important too. It's important to note that memory fails. 40-year-old memory should be suspect. So I try and think back to like my first 5e campaign when I made the switch from 4e to 5e. And if you were to try and ask me like specifics about that campaign in 2014, which was 10 years ago, that'd be hard for me to do, like what I did and at what point and what time. I would only be able to give you like a rough year of dates. Like it was 2014 and the group did XYZ. So I think that makes a lot of this, it makes a lot of it very difficult in order to like suss it out and get like a timeline as well. We're doing the best that we can, and that's all we can do.
That actually reminded me, I had some extra books. I didn't know if we would talk about historiography at any point, but since my professional training is in American history and I got a master's degree in it, one of the books that you guys might be interested in is called That Noble Dream. Okay. It's by a Novik here, and it's specifically about the American profession and about this idea of objectivity when it comes to the historical professions. And just as a quick snapshot, one of the issues you wind up getting in the 19th century, because of the sciences starting to overtake everything, is that everybody then tried to basically make all disciplines that are academic into sciences. We see this with history, and this does include Marxism. We also see it with the classics, Latin, Greek, myth, all that stuff, where they go from being literature to be read and also to be written, but rather as just a force that is doing a thing, or just grammar translation with, the lecture being about irregular verbs. So that's also something that you've got to deal with is, is it possible to get to something that is objectively correct? Maybe not, probably not, because we're dealing with faulty memory and we can't get outside the meat suit, as I like to say. But what we can do is say that there were some guys in the 60s and the 70s that played some really cool games. They wrote some stuff down. They've done interviews. This is what they say. This is what we think it means. And because of that, you wind up getting a field, or at least the beginning of it, where you do have room for different interpretations of stuff, as you have mentioned with yourself and the use of the D20 for white box.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I'll say like what I do in white box isn't exactly by the book necessarily, but it's definitely informed and inspired by what's in those books. Like if you were just limited again to those 4 books in 1974, and you were like me and you looked at it like, I don't want to do this 3-tier resolution system. This sounds bad. I don't want to use it. And you even experiment with it a bit and you're like, I don't like this.
Can I just roll some D6s? Come on.
Yeah, like you'd be like me and be like, I got to pick one of these systems in order to sort of make it work. And to me, the D20 is at this point, and this is an anachronistic part of it because it wouldn't have been in the 70s. Maybe it was starting to become that because obviously we looked at the 73 draft and it's inherent there that there's a D20 in there with the 5% increments. But to me, it's like the D20 is iconic to D&D. And so like to deviate from that, it's like in the minds of people today, if you're trying to get them into old school D&D, you're trying to get them to play 0E, you're trying to get them interested in it, I think you need to have an entrance point where they get it through the D20. And I've not shied away from pointing people towards like Alchemic Raker, who has, if his thing is perfectly compatible with Whitebox. If you want to have that 3-tier system and you want to reference it, you totally can do that with his Hell March for Shadow Dark and the Old Lords here. So on Drive Through RPG. So yeah. Wow. Thank you, Ned. Super generous of you. I appreciate that.
Wonderful.
I have nothing else to add. I don't know if you have anything. Uh-oh.
My bookshelf is rejecting me. Oh no. No, please.
I don't like that one. Get that out of here. I don't have anything else to add. I think we presented a pretty fair and reasonable interpretation of history and what we know. We might be wrong. A lot of these guys like Griff claim to have documents that we don't have access to, like you mentioned. And so we're sort of working with what we can. And I guess what I would say is if you have the documents to refute these sorts of things, please, like, for the sake of the hobby, release them and share them, at least put them up for sale, at least.
Yeah.
At the very least,
I know that Fellowship of the Thing is still working on producing some stuff. And, I've got Blackmoor Foundations. I've got Tona's Borg.
Mm-hmm.
Give me more.
Yeah. Put it out there, I would love to be corrected and to have the full story here because I'm interested in this stuff, right? Like I want to know more about what people are doing in this really cool and critical era of the development of the game and its roots and where it came from. So yeah, I would again, the links are in chat here. Check out his Dom's Kickstarter, check out his Substack. I got nothing more to add, so I won't belabor the conversation here, but I don't know if there's any final point you want to add or direct people towards.
Oh, I think we've done a fair amount at this stage. I suppose we could ask the audience if they've got any final questions.
Yeah, oh sure. We got some time. Yeah. So if you guys have do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, we just
I don't know if I'll have an answer.
Quick. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I'll have an answer, but feel free to throw them in chat if you have a question.
We can give an answer, but it might not be the answer.
What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? Someone has to do that one every single time. Make a Monty Python reference.
Is it African or European?
I gotta watch that again. I kind of want to watch it with my daughter, but I'm afraid of some of the more adult content in that. So
yes, despite being PG, Holy Grail is not a PG movie. As we think about it today. Hey, we got a question.
So Ned Leeds 908 says, how much do you think convention play impacted all of this? I think that there's a couple of different factors that impacted convention play, and then convention play impacted that. Like I think that you see with AD&D was very much, I think it was designed for convention play and for competitive play, right?
Tournaments.
The tournaments, the D&D tournaments. And I think that's why You needed since there's a competition going on, much like you would with 50 people in the same game, you need some sort of standard, and AD&D seems to really lay towards that. And I think that convention play sort of leans into this idea of you need to show up and you need to be playing the same game as everyone else in order to have the same shared experience. So if you're come from like special homebrew version of the game and then you're joining the convention game, which might be playing more by the rule books, or they're going to give you like, here's a list of things that we are changing and you have to abide by them. There's still this like metric and this sense of
consistency
that's needed. So but I think that's been there from the beginning in a lot of respects. It's been a requirement that's from there. Like if you're doing club play and you have 50 people in a campaign, you also need consistency there. So I don't know what you think, Dom.
Well, what I can say for convention play is that it is how they actually got people to understand the game that had been produced. Okay. Gygax and some of the guys start going to all the conventions they can. Because after Gen Con proves a success, you got some other wargaming conventions that pop up around the country, and because of that, they travel and then they do D&D tournaments. And not only do they teach people how to play, they're also selling the game at those tournaments and those events, and they also get to bring in money at the same time by getting a seat at that said event. So you wind up having this nice cycle of you go out, you sell product, you make money, and also people learn how to play the game. They then, if I'm going to borrow from Tim Cass, they then infect other people, and then they buy the game. And then, just like a good old game of Pandemic, it winds up getting around. But because of that, at the same time, you start getting these different interpretations of what the game is and how it is played. I really can't say can or should at this stage, to where even in, say, A&E, they start noticing that people play differently enough to where, say, like the Caltech guys, they are too violent, they're too gritty. That really doesn't compare. It's not really compatible with what we do in LA. And so you start getting what I would call enclaves of D&D. And because of that, it practically demands standardization, which is part of what AD&D was trying to do.
Sure.
I suppose we could say at the expense of some of the loosey-goosiness of OD&D.
I kind of view the loosey-goosiness of OD&D as like there was this kind of understanding that you would read the rules, understand them, maybe use them a little bit. Like Gary even says, like introduce aspects as in the introduction for advice on running your game in OD&D. Like introduce these aspects as they're needed. But I think that this concept sort of shifted over time to where there was sort of like, I'll just say this. I hate this phrase that we see thrown around a lot, especially in the OSR, of rulings over rules. I think that you can't have rulings without rules. And I think that the original sort of context of changing things was sort of lost.
Yeah, McCrease said something like that, didn't he?
Who did?
McCrease, Alexander McCrease. I'm certain he said something like that.
He's probably said something like this too. Yeah, where there was sort of this understanding of mastery and then change it, and the sort of Chesterton's fence position that I have. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of been lost to where now we're telling new people to sort of change things right off the bat. And if they don't understand it or they don't like it, and it's like, I don't know if that's always the best advice, because I think we've all ran the kind of game, I've talked about this before, where you sort of make a ruling and you have to be, again, we talked about consistency. So you stick with it and you're like, oh no, this broke my game.
It happens. Yeah.
I've done that like so many times, and I can't be the only one that's experienced that. So I think that like the loosey-goosiness of 0E was sort of in a certain context, and then that context was lost. And so then AD&D and tournaments and conventions come around, and we have to sort of realign and get back on track as far as like consistency is concerned. So that's just my take. I don't know if there's any other questions. What is your name? What is your quest?
To seek the Grail, which Knight Errant came out recently, so that's cool as heck.
Oh yeah. I didn't get to back that one, but I am interested in that game, so it does look pretty cool.
I needed a chivalry RPG, so I went all in on it, and the art they showed for the DM screen being a rendition of Paladin in Hell, that really sealed the deal for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I like that chivalry stuff too, and I recently backed the before, and I think it ended at this point, which is the 2nd edition Pendragon. So, you know, I'm excited for that.
Would you like to joust?
Hey, the jousting, I like the jousting in chainmail, and I incorporate it into White Box because it's pretty much like feels like rock paper scissors on steroids.
Oh,
you know?
I need to actually try this then.
It's pretty cool.
I'm not gonna lie. I look at this chart and I get my eyes crossed because I don't know what's going on just yet.
So like every position has like so if you choose a defensive position, your defensive position chooses what areas you can attack on your opponent. And so then you make that decision, and then you both reveal what it is that you've chosen, and then you look at the matrix and cross-reference it and go like, oh, my lance broke, but I unhorsed you. Your lance only broke, but I'm not on horse. So we look at the points that we scored. And then if you're unhorsed, you're sort of screwed once you're on horse. Or your lance breaks, I think it's once your lance breaks, you're sort of screwed, because then you're sort of pigeonholed into certain attacking, defensive and attacking positions where you're stuck in that way. So now your opponent knows your moves. So it's like that first joust is super important, and then after that, it's like whatever happens, it's sort of screwed. It's pretty neat. I don't know. I like it.
There's also a detail here I just want to call everybody's attention to. If you're looking at the shield, it's got Dexter, Pale, and then Sinister. You know, right, left, and then you know, center, because Sinister is left in Latin and then Dexter is gonna be right. Hence, ambidexterity is having 2 right hands.
The little language lesson there.
But
Let's see. Let's see some comments here. There's a certain maturity to game publishing you have to accept also in terms of formatting, the grammar and text, etc. Read through 2025 eyes, they might seem more like suggestions. They aren't. Yeah, you know, like in 0E it says like recommended for chainmail, but it's like recommending that you have a referee. It's recommending that you have players. It's recommending that you use dice. It's like, what do you mean when you say recommend? Like, we're looking at it through this sort of modern evolved version of Rule 0, and we look and read it recommended, and we're like, I could just do whatever I want, and it's like that's not what they're meaning by that. So
it's a recommendation. I could be a game designer too. Look at me. Yeah. I'm not a game designer.
Those Matrix style combats are popular in Avalon Hill sports games. I wonder if that was an influence. Yeah.
They played a lot of Avalon Hill. It was the big cheese. Because Gettysburg, which came out in 1958, got both Gygax and Arneson into wargaming. And oh no, we got to play the Union versus the Confederacy because that's the theme, guys.
Oh no, exactly. You'd use more precise language now than an army of editors with an army of editors. Yeah,
I was actually kind of struck like that a few days ago because I was looking at the 4th edition books because I've been finishing up that section, and it's just Gygax, Arneson, but then you've got like lead design, editor, art person, producers, and all this stuff. And you just wonder about the expense to produce some of these books.
Well, I think that's why indie sort of kind of is drawn to old school in a lot of respects, because it's not because, in my opinion, the rules are easy. I think that's a non sequitur. That's not exactly it. There might be some people that perceive the rules to be simpler, and so they're drawn to it. But I think as we've gotten into more design by committee, it gets the game loses the hobby in the game loses some soul a little bit. So that's why AD&D was still huge. But then you look at who was involved in it and the names in that book, and it's a lot smaller. And it's sort of like, oh, that's why it wasn't designed by committee. There was a small group of people in some games around the time, like 1 or 2 people that were involved in it. So it's like, and then you have your play testers and stuff. So.
Travis Fopper is in the chat. Doesn't he have something coming up regarding jousting?
Yes, he has Full Metal Tilt. He's coming on the 19th, so next week, to talk about Full Metal Tilt, which is his Kickstarter is going on right now. So go check that out. Just search Full Metal Tilt on Kickstarter. He sort of made a entire game out of the jousting for the Dragon Slayer RPG. But I think from what I've seen, it would be still roughly compatible with Whitebox if you wanted to use his jousting rules instead of what I have in Whitebox. So, and you want maybe something a little more in depth. So, really cool stuff.
Could kind of do Excalibur the movie with all those jousting rules.
Maybe, yeah. I have to look at his rules again, so forgive me, Travis. I don't remember everything you've written off the top of my head because you sent me a couple months ago. You sent me, I think it was before my Kickstarter went live. You sent me a work in progress of what you had done. So check out Travis deserves it. Go check out his Kickstarter and support what he's doing. So,
I don't see any other questions.
Yeah, and I kind of got to use the restroom, so I think we should end the stream. I think we provided hopefully some compelling evidence for the influence of chainmail and the timeline of events, and there's some shakiness to it, but ultimately I think that RPG Mr. Plinkett's here. He has a question. Oh no, what's your question? Save versus bladder. I'm gonna fail soon, so
now shut up a rating. No, this is only the second phase of the fight. We had 2 more to go.
Thank you for the shout out. It's compatible with Whitebox and really any OSR system. You'll get my updated copy soon.
Sweet.
Sick. Looking forward to it. What's your question, RPG Mr. Plinkett?
I think he's waiting to see if you save versus bladder now.
Oh. Is that the troll? I'm going to be sitting here waiting. I'm like,
really could be. All right, we need a shot clock.
Are there any more questions? Other than that, I think that real questions. Other than that, I think we'll call it. Ned Leeds, thank you again for your generosity stream. He's going off to get swole. Go do it, buddy.
Nice.
Yeah, next time. Okay. All good. Thank you guys for watching. Again, check out Dom's book. You get the PDF, and I'm assuming once you release the book to backers, then people that didn't get to back will be able to buy a physical copy of it at some point too. Right.
Yeah, the goal is to get the book printed, make sure it didn't screw too much up, get that out to backers, and then once that is done, get it up on drive-through because they can actually distribute to people pretty well, and just set it up there because it's got the biggest reach.
Sure, and people might be interested in that there. Yeah, so we'll end the stream here. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys found it compelling. If you're watching this after the fact, I guess leave a comment below, like, subscribe, share the video, all that good stuff. Whitebox PDFs are out. I made a Google form. I haven't even checked it yet. I'm going to probably wait to look at any leftover errors that people might find. And if you haven't filled out your backer survey, please do so that I can get it going. I'd like to get the box set rolling this month and into production going, and I'd like to get the print-on-demand books going as well and getting those fulfilled for people. And so please fill out your backer surveys. It helps me out greatly. But we'll end that here. Hope you found the stream compelling. Thank you again for Dom for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate it. And we will catch you guys in the next stream. Next week, we have Travis on again for Full Metal Tilt. That should be fun, talking about jousting and tilting at windmills, as many people like to do in this hobby.
Oh, I love Don Quixote.
All right. We'll catch you guys next time.
Later.